Mike Rodriguez never thought his life was particularly exciting, and honestly, he liked it that way. At 32, he had found his rhythm as a software developer working for a mid-sized tech company in the heart of Chicago. His days were filled with lines of code, debugging sessions, and the occasional team meeting that could have been an email. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well and gave him the freedom to live comfortably in his one-bedroom apartment on the 15th floor of a modern downtown building. Tuesday evenings were Mike's favorite. After a long day at the office wrestling with stubborn programming problems, he would come home, heat up some leftover pizza or order something simple, and settle in with his laptop to catch up on the latest episodes of his favorite crime documentary series. He had a particular fascination with stories about ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary situations, never imagining that he would soon become the subject of such a story himself. The apartment building where Mike lived was one of those sleek, modern complexes that had sprouted up all over downtown in recent years. It boasted a doorman, security cameras, and keycard access to every floor. The residents were mostly young, professionals like himself, people who valued privacy and quiet. Everyone minded their own business, which suited Mike perfectly. He wasn't antisocial, but after spending all day collaborating with his coworkers, he treasured his solitude. His upstairs neighbor was someone he knew only in passing. Lisa Park worked in finance for one of the big consulting firms downtown. She was always impeccably dressed in business suits, carrying a leather briefcase, and speaking into her phone about client meetings and quarterly reports. In the 6 months since she had moved into the building, their interactions had been limited to polite nods in the elevator and the occasional good morning when they happened to leave for work at the same time. Mike had noticed that Lisa kept unusual hours sometimes, being a light sleeper. He would occasionally hear her moving around upstairs late at night or very early in the morning. He assumed it was work-related, given how demanding her job seemed to be. The walls in the building were generally thick, but sound had a way of traveling through the ceiling, especially when someone was walking around in heels or moving furniture. This particular Tuesday had been especially challenging at work. Mike's team was racing to meet a deadline for a major client, and a critical bug had emerged in their software that seemed to defy all logical explanation. He had spent most of the day staring at his computer screen, running tests, and trying different approaches to solve the problem. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, his eyes were tired. His back was sore from hunching over his desk, and all he wanted was to go home and decompress. The evening routine was comforting in its predictability. Mike stopped by the small market on the corner to grab a sandwich and a bottle of water, exchanged pleasantries with Tony, the elderly man who had been running the store for over 20 years, and made his way back to his apartment building. The doorman, Carlos, greeted him with his usual friendly wave and asked about his day. These small interactions were part of what Mike appreciated about city living. You could be surrounded by people without feeling overwhelmed by social obligations. Back in his apartment, Mike kicked off his shoes, changed into comfortable sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, and settled onto his couch with his laptop. The apartment wasn't large, but it was efficiently designed and felt spacious enough for his needs. The living room had a great view of the city skyline, which was particularly beautiful at sunset when the glass buildings reflected the golden light. As he scrolled through his streaming service looking for something to watch, Mike heard the familiar sounds of his upstairs neighbor arriving home. The soft click of heels on hardwood floors, the sound of a door closing, and then the general settling-in noises that people make when they get home from work. He thought nothing of it and continued browsing through documentaries and series options. Around 8 o'clock, Mike decided on a documentary about a famous art heist that had happened in Boston decades earlier. He had always been fascinated by true crime stories, particularly those involving elaborate schemes and mysteries that took years to solve. There was something compelling about the way ordinary circumstances could suddenly become extraordinary, how regular people could find themselves caught up in situations that seemed like they belonged in movies rather than real life. As the documentary played, Mike found himself drawn into the story of how thieves had managed to steal priceless paintings from a museum by disguising themselves as police officers. The audacity of the plan and the mystery surrounding the stolen artwork kept him engaged, and he barely noticed the time passing. It was around 10:30 when he first became aware that something seemed different upstairs. Instead of the usual settling down for the evening sounds, he could hear what seemed like restless movement. Footsteps pacing back and forth, the sound of furniture being moved, and what might have been phone conversations, though he couldn't make out any words. Mike paused his documentary and listened for a moment. The sounds weren't alarming exactly, but they were unusual for Lisa, who typically seemed to follow a quiet, predictable routine. He considered whether he should be concerned, but decided it was probably just work stress. Everyone dealt with pressure differently, and maybe she was the type who needed to pace when she was thinking through a problem. By 11 o'clock, Mike was ready to call it a night. He closed his laptop, brushed his teeth, and prepared for bed, looking forward to getting a good night's sleep before another challenging day at the office. The sounds from upstairs had quieted down, and he assumed Lisa had finally settled in for the evening as well, as he lay in bed scrolling through his phone one last time before sleep. Mike felt grateful for his simple, predictable life. He had a good job, a comfortable home, and the freedom to spend his evenings however he chose. Tomorrow would bring new programming challenges, but tonight he could rest easy knowing that his world was exactly as he had left it. He had no way of knowing that in just a few hours, everything would change in the most unexpected way possible, and that his quiet Tuesday night was about to become the beginning of the most bizarre experience of his life. Mike was deep in a dream about debugging code when something pulled him back to consciousness. At first, he wasn't sure what had woken him up. The room was dark, and his phone showed 3:17 a.m. in bright green numbers. He lay still for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of the city at night, distant traffic, the hum of the air conditioning, and the occasional siren in the distance. Then he heard it, the soft creak of his bedroom door opening. His heart jumped into his throat. Mike lived alone, and he was absolutely certain he had locked his front door before going to bed. The building had security, keycard access, and he was 15 floors up. There was no logical way someone could be in his apartment. Yet the unmistakable sound of footsteps on his hardwood floor told him otherwise. He stayed perfectly still, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe he was still dreaming. Maybe it was just the building settling. Maybe his upstairs neighbor had somehow gotten confused and entered the wrong apartment. But as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he could make out a figure standing in his doorway. The person was small, definitely female, and appeared to be wearing very little clothing. Mike's first instinct was panic, followed immediately by confusion. This wasn't a burglar or an intruder in any traditional sense. The figure seemed to be waiting, almost hesitant, rather than threatening. "Hello," Mike whispered, his voice hoarse with sleep and fear. The figure stepped forward slightly, and in the dim light filtering through his blinds from the street lamps below, he recognized his upstairs neighbor, Lisa. But something was very wrong. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her face seemed streaked with tears, and she was wearing only a thin robe that she clutched tightly around herself. "Mike," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry. I know this is completely crazy, but I need your help." Mike sat up in bed, pulling his covers up to his chest, trying to process what was happening. "Lisa, how did you get in here? What's wrong?" She took another step into the room, and he could see that she was shaking. "Your door was unlocked," she said, though Mike was certain that wasn't true. "I didn't know where else to go. Something terrible has happened, and I need help." "Okay, just stay right there," Mike said, reaching for his lamp. When the light came on, he could see Lisa more clearly, and what he saw made his confusion deepen. She looked genuinely terrified, but also somehow desperate in a way that didn't make sense for a typical emergency. "What kind of help?" he asked, grabbing a t-shirt from his bedside table and pulling it on. "Are you hurt? Do you need me to call the police or an ambulance?" Lisa shook her head frantically. "No, No police. No doctors. Well, not regular doctors anyway. She was speaking quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know this sounds insane, but I'm part of a medical study, a fertility research program. Something went wrong tonight. Very wrong, and the researcher called me in a panic. Mike swung his legs out of bed and stood up, keeping his distance but trying to appear calm and helpful. What kind of research program? What went wrong? It's complicated, Lisa said. Pacing now in his small bedroom. I've been taking experimental treatments for the past few months. They're supposed to optimize fertility cycles, make everything more efficient. But tonight, Dr. Foster called me around midnight. She said there was a dangerous interaction with some other medication I'm taking. Mike nodded, though he was having trouble following her explanation. What kind of interaction? Lisa stopped pacing and looked directly at him, her eyes wide. With fear, she said, I have a 6-hour window. If certain things don't happen in the next few hours, I could face permanent damage, maybe worse. What kind of things? Mike asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. The answer, I need to find someone, Lisa said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. My boyfriend is in Tokyo on business. I can't reach him. The time difference, you know? And Dr. Foster said I can't wait. She called it a biological emergency. Mike felt like he was trying to understand a puzzle with half the pieces missing. I still don't understand what you need from me. If it's a medical emergency, shouldn't you be in a hospital? The study is very specialized, Lisa explained, wrapping her robe tight around herself. Regular hospitals wouldn't know how to handle this. Dr. Foster explained that the experimental hormones have created a situation where my body is in a kind of overdrive. If I don't respond to the biological signals properly, the treatment could backfire catastrophically. Mike ran his hand through his hair, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. The whole situation felt surreal, like something out of a science fiction movie rather than his ordinary Tuesday night. Lisa, I want to help you, but I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me to do. She looked at him with an expression that was part desperation and part embarrassment. I know. We barely know each other. I know this is the strangest thing that's ever happened. But I'm scared, Mike, really scared. And you're the only person I could think of who might help. Mike felt a wave of sympathy for his neighbor, despite his confusion about the situation. She clearly believed she was in some kind of medical crisis, and her fear seemed genuine. At the same time, something about her story didn't quite add up. Medical emergencies that required such specific and unusual intervention seemed unlikely. Even in experimental research. Okay, he said carefully. Let's sit down and figure this out. Do you have Dr. Foster's contact information? Maybe we should call her and get more details about what's happening. Lisa nodded eagerly. Yes, I have her number. She said she'd be available all night to monitor the situation. She's really worried about what might happen if we don't act. Quickly, Mike gestured toward his living room. Let me grab you something to wear, and then we can call her together. I want to understand exactly what kind of medical situation we're dealing with. As Lisa followed him out of the bedroom, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than he was being told. The whole scenario seemed too bizarre, too convenient, too much like something designed to manipulate rather than a genuine medical emergency. But looking at Lisa's frightened face, he decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, at least until he could get more information. He had no idea that he was about to uncover one of the most elaborate and disturbing scams he could ever imagine, or that this strange night would change both of their lives in ways they never could have anticipated. Mike handed Lisa one of his old college sweatshirts and a pair of sweatpants, then gave her some privacy to get dressed while he made coffee in his kitchen. His mind was spinning with questions, and he hoped that caffeine might help him think more clearly about this bizarre situation. When Lisa emerged from his bedroom, looking slightly more composed in his oversized clothes, they sat down at his small dining table. Okay, Mike said, setting two mugs of coffee between them. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about this research program you're involved in. Lisa wrapped her hands around the warm mug and took a deep breath. It's called the Advanced Reproductive Health Initiative. I found out about it through an advertisement I saw online about 3 months ago. They were looking for women between 25 and 35 who were interested in optimizing their fertility for future family planning. Mike nodded, though he was already starting to feel skeptical. What kind of advertisement? Like on a medical website or something? It was on social media, actually, Lisa admitted, but it looked very professional. Clean graphics, medical terminology, testimonials from other participants. The ad said they were conducting cutting-edge research that could revolutionize how women approach reproductive health. And you didn't think it was strange that they were advertising medical research on social media? Mike asked gently. Lisa looked defensive for a moment, then her shoulders slumped. I know how it sounds now, but at the time, it seemed legitimate. Dr. Foster has impressive credentials. She has a medical degree from a prestigious university. She's published research papers, and she works at the Metropolitan Women's Health Center downtown. Mike pulled out his phone. Let me look up this center while you tell me more about the program. As Mike searched, Lisa continued her story. The initial consultation was very thorough. Dr. Foster explained that they were testing new hormone treatments that could help women optimize their natural cycles, reduce the risk of fertility problems later in life, and even enhance the chances of healthy pregnancies when the time came. How much did this program cost? Mike asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. There was a participation fee, Lisa said quietly. $5,000 for the full 3-month program. But Dr. Foster explained that was just to cover the cost of the specialized medications and monitoring. She said most fertility treatments cost much more, and this was preventative rather than reactive. Mike looked up from his phone with a frown. Lisa, I'm looking at the Metropolitan Women's Health Center website right now, and there's no mention of any Advanced Reproductive Health Initiative. And I don't see a Dr. Foster listed on their staff directory. Lisa leaned over to look at his phone screen, her face growing pale. That can't be right. I've been to her office. I've met with her multiple times. She has diplomas on the wall, medical journals on her desk. Everything you'd expect from a real doctor. What's the address of her office? Mike asked. Lisa gave him the address, and Mike quickly searched for it online. According to this, that address is a shared office building. There are dozens of different businesses there, including some that rent space by the month or even by the day. The color continued to drain from Lisa's face as the implications of Mike's research began to sink in. But the treatments I've been taking. She gave me detailed explanations of how they work, what to expect, potential side effects. She seemed to know so much about reproductive medicine. Mike reached across the table and gently touched Lisa's hand. I think we need to call this Dr. Foster number and see what she says. But Lisa, I'm getting a really bad feeling about this situation. Lisa pulled out her phone with shaking hands and scrolled through her contacts. Here it is, she said, showing Mike the number. She told me to call if I had any questions or concerns, day or night. Mike noted the number and then did a reverse lookup on his own phone. This number isn't registered to any medical practice, he said quietly. It's listed as a prepaid cell phone. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, Lisa said, though her voice lacked conviction. Maybe she uses a separate phone for the research program. Let's call and see what happens, Mike suggested. Lisa dialed the number and put it on speakerphone. After several rings, a professional-sounding voice answered. Dr. Foster here, Lisa. I've been waiting for your call. How are you feeling? Have you been able to address the emergency situation we discussed? Dr. Foster, Lisa said, her voice wavering slightly. I'm here with my neighbor, Mike. I told him about the situation, and he's helping me understand what's happening. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I see. Well, Lisa, I hope you understand how time-sensitive this situation is. We really can't afford to delay much longer. Mike leaned toward the phone. Dr. Foster, this is Mike. I'm trying. to help Lisa understand exactly what kind of medical emergency we're dealing with here. Can you explain the specific nature of the hormone interaction you mentioned? Another pause. Longer this time. I'm afraid I can't discuss patient details with someone who isn't authorized to receive medical information. Lisa, perhaps you could step away for a private conversation. Actually, Mike said, I'd like to verify some information first. What's your medical license number? And can you confirm your affiliation with the Metropolitan Women's Health Center? The line went quiet for several seconds. Then Dr. Foster's voice came back, but it sounded different now, less smooth and professional. I don't appreciate being questioned by someone who has no medical background and no understanding of the complexities involved in cutting-edge research. Mike looked at Lisa, who was staring at the phone with growing alarm. I'm just trying to help my neighbor verify that she's receiving legitimate medical care, Mike said calmly. Surely you can understand why someone might want to confirm credentials in a situation like this. Lisa, Dr. Foster said, ignoring Mike completely. You need to make a decision quickly. The window for intervention is closing, and if you don't act soon, the consequences could be severe. I can't be responsible for what happens if you choose to listen to someone who doesn't understand the science involved. Mike was about to respond when he heard a click and realized that Dr. Foster had hung up. He and Lisa stared at each other across the table, both realizing that something was very wrong. Mike, Lisa whispered, what if this whole thing is fake? What if I've been taking some kind of unknown drugs for 3 months? What if everything she told me was a lie? Mike reached for her hand again, trying to offer comfort while his own mind raced with the implications. We need to find out. Exactly. What's been going on? Do you have any of the medication she gave you? Any written materials from the program? Lisa nodded slowly. Everything's upstairs in my apartment. Bottles of pills, injection supplies, information packets. Even a journal where I've been tracking my symptoms and reactions. We need to look at all of it, Mike said, and I think we need to contact the real Metropolitan Women's Health Center to see if they know anything about this program or this Dr. Foster person. As they prepared to go upstairs to Lisa's apartment, Mike couldn't help but think about how quickly their strange night had transformed from a bizarre medical emergency into something much more sinister. He was beginning to suspect that Lisa had been the victim of an elaborate fraud, but the full scope of what had been done to her was only beginning to become clear. Lisa's apartment was a mirror image of Mike's, but it felt completely different. Where his place was comfortable and lived in, hers looked like something out of a magazine. Everything was perfectly organized, from the books arranged by height on her shelves to the throw pillows positioned just so on her couch. But tonight, that perfect order had been disturbed. Papers were scattered across her dining table, and several small bottles and medical supplies were arranged in neat rows next to her laptop. This is everything, Lisa said, her voice hollow as she gestured to the collection of materials. 3 months of my life and $5,000 all sitting right here. Mike picked up one of the bottles and examined the label. The printing looked professional enough, with official-sounding names and dosage instructions, but something felt off about it. These don't have any pharmacy labels on them, he observed. No prescription information, no pharmacy name or address. Lisa sank into one of her dining chairs. Dr. Foster said they were specially compounded for the research program, she explained, that regular pharmacies wouldn't have access to these experimental formulations. Mike continued examining the materials while Lisa watched. There were information packets with glossy covers featuring stock photos of smiling women and babies. The text was full of impressive-sounding medical terminology, but as Mike read more carefully, he noticed that much of it was vague and repetitive. Lisa, look at this, Mike said, holding up one of the brochures. This paragraph about hormone optimization is almost identical to this other section about fertility enhancement. They've just rearranged the same sentences and changed a few words. Lisa leaned over to look, and Mike could see the realization dawning on her face. I remember thinking some of the information seemed repetitive, but Dr. Foster always had explanations for everything. She made it sound so scientific and complex. Mike turned to Lisa's laptop, which was still open to a website that looked like it belonged to a legitimate medical research facility. "Can I take a closer look at this website?" he asked. As Mike navigated through the site, he began to notice more red flags. The About Us section had generic stock photos labeled as staff members. The research publications mentioned in the credentials section didn't exist when he searched for them in medical databases. Most tellingly, when he checked the website's registration information, it had only been created for months ago. "Lisa," Mike said gently, "I think we need to call the real Metropolitan Women's Health Center right now. I know it's almost 4 in the morning, but they should have someone available for emergencies." Lisa nodded, though Mike could see that she was struggling to accept what was becoming increasingly obvious. Together, they found the official number for the medical center and called the after-hours line. After explaining their situation to the night supervisor, they were connected with Dr. Amanda Collins, the center's director of reproductive medicine. Dr. Collins listened patiently as Mike and Lisa explained the situation, including the supposed research program and the mysterious Dr. Foster. "I can tell you with absolute certainty," Dr. Collins said, "that we have no advanced reproductive health initiative at our facility. We also have no one named Dr. Foster on our staff, and we would never conduct research by advertising on social media platforms." Lisa put her head in her hands as the full scope of what had happened to her became clear. Mike continued the conversation with Dr. Collins, who was both concerned and helpful. "What you're describing sounds like a sophisticated medical fraud," Dr. Collins explained. "These scams are becoming more common, unfortunately. They target people's deepest concerns and desires, in this case, fertility and reproductive health. I strongly recommend that you bring those medications to our lab tomorrow for analysis. We need to know exactly what substances you've been taking." After they hung up, Lisa and Mike sat in silence for several minutes. The weight of the deception was overwhelming, and Mike could see that Lisa was processing not just the financial loss, but the violation of trust and the potential health risks she had unknowingly taken. "I feel so stupid," Lisa finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not stupid," Mike replied firmly. "You're the victim of a crime. These people are professionals at deception. They know exactly how to target people who are being responsible and proactive about their health." Mike spent the next hour helping Lisa document everything they had discovered. They took photos of all the materials, saved screenshots of the fake website, and compiled a timeline of Lisa's interactions with the supposed Dr. Foster. As they worked, more inconsistencies emerged. The phone calls from Dr. Foster had always come from different numbers. The office appointments had been brief and always involved Lisa waiting alone in a small room. Before Dr. Foster appeared, the treatments had been administered by injection, but Lisa had never been given detailed information about what exactly was being injected. "The scariest part," Lisa said as they organized the evidence, "is that I never questioned any of it." She was so convincing, so professional. She answered all my questions with these detailed explanations that sounded so knowledgeable. Mike nodded. "That's exactly how these scams work. They do their homework, they learn enough real medical terminology to sound convincing, and they prey on the fact that most people trust medical professionals." As dawn began to break outside Lisa's apartment windows, they made the decision to contact the police and file a formal report. Mike also suggested they reach out to the Federal Trade Commission and the State Medical Board to report the fraud. "There's something else we need to consider," Mike said carefully. "If they did this to you, they're probably doing it to other people too. This could be a much bigger operation than just one fake doctor targeting one person." Lisa looked at the pile of evidence they had collected, and Mike could see a new determination in her eyes. The shock and embarrassment were giving way to anger and a desire for justice. "You're right," she said. "We need to stop them from doing this to anyone else. And I need to find out exactly what they've been putting in my body for the past 3 months." As they prepared to face the long day ahead, Mike reflected on how quickly their strange night had evolved from a bizarre medical emergency to uncovering what appeared to be a sophisticated criminal operation. He had started the evening thinking his biggest problem was a stubborn piece of code at work, and now he was helping his neighbor navigate one of the most elaborate frauds he could have imagined. But despite the seriousness of the situation, Mike felt a strange sense of purpose. Lisa needed help, and he was in a position to provide it. Sometimes the most important things in life happen when you least expected them. The police station at 7 in the morning was not a place Mike had ever imagined himself visiting. But there they were, sitting in an interview room with Detective Patricia Wong, who specialized in fraud cases. Lisa had brought all the evidence they had compiled during their long night of investigation, and the detective was examining everything with professional interest. This is one of the most sophisticated medical fraud cases I've seen, Detective Wong said, looking through the fake research materials. The level of detail they put into creating this false identity and medical program is impressive. In a disturbing way, Mike and Lisa spent 2 hours walking Detective Wong through everything they had discovered. The detective took detailed notes and made copies of all the documentation, including the bottles of unknown substances that Lisa had been taking. "We'll get these analyzed immediately," Detective Wong assured them. "We need to know exactly what compounds you've been injecting, and I want you to go to the real medical center today for a full workup. We need to document any potential health effects from whatever you've been given." After leaving the police station, Mike accompanied Lisa to the Metropolitan Women's Health Center, where Dr. Collins had arranged for comprehensive testing. The real medical facility was nothing like the small, sparse office where Lisa had met with the fake Dr. Foster. This was a busy, professional medical center with multiple departments and dozens of staff members. Dr. Collins was exactly what Mike expected a real medical professional to be like. She was knowledgeable but approachable, concerned but not alarmist, and she explained everything in terms that both Mike and Lisa could understand. The good news, Dr. Collins said after reviewing Lisa's medical history, is that your vital signs look normal, and your preliminary blood work doesn't show any obvious signs of toxicity. But we'll need to wait for more detailed lab results to get a complete picture of what you've been exposed to over the next few days. The investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Wong called to inform them that the fake Dr. Foster's phone numbers had been traced to a network of prepaid phones, all registered under false identities. The office building where Lisa had met with her turned out to be a temporary rental space that had been abandoned immediately after Lisa's last appointment. But the most shocking discovery came when the detective revealed that Lisa was not the only victim. The fraud ring had been operating in multiple cities, targeting women through social media advertisements and creating elaborate fake medical programs. In total, they had identified over 40 victims who had paid fees ranging from $3,000 to $10,000 for various fraudulent treatments. "The analysis of your medications came back," Dr. Collins told Lisa during a follow-up appointment. "Most of what you were taking was harmless, essentially expensive vitamins and saline solution. But there were some unidentified compounds that we're still analyzing. The important thing is that there don't appear to be any lasting health effects." Lisa was relieved about her health, but angry about the broader scope of the crime. 40 other women, she said to Mike as they left the medical center. 40 other people who trusted these criminals with their health and their money. Mike had been thinking about something that had been bothering him since their first night of investigation. "Lisa, there's something I don't understand. Why did the fake Dr. Foster call you that night with that bizarre emergency story? If the whole thing was just about taking your money, why create such an elaborate and risky situation?" Lisa had been wondering the same thing. Detective Wong thinks it might have been a panic response. Maybe they knew their operation was about to be exposed, and they were trying to manipulate me into doing something that would compromise me or make me less likely to report them. 3 weeks after that strange Tuesday night, Mike and Lisa found themselves in a federal courthouse where the FBI had taken over the case due to its multi-state nature. The fraud ring had been more extensive than anyone had initially realized, with connections to similar scams targeting people with various health concerns. From weight loss to pain management to fertility issues, Agent Robert Kim, who was leading the federal investigation, explained to them that their quick thinking and thorough documentation had been crucial in unraveling the entire operation. Most victims of these kinds of scams are too embarrassed to come forward, or they don't realize they've been scammed until much later. Your immediate response and careful evidence collection helped us move quickly before they could disappear completely. The main perpetrators were eventually arrested in 3 different states. The fake Dr. Foster turned out to be a former pharmaceutical sales representative named Jennifer Walsh, who had been recruiting accomplices and creating increasingly sophisticated medical fraud schemes for over 2 years. For Lisa, the emotional recovery was more challenging than the physical recovery. She felt violated and foolish, despite everyone's reassurances that she had been the victim of a carefully planned crime. Mike found himself becoming not just a neighbor who had helped in a crisis, but a genuine friend who supported her through the difficult process of healing from the experience. "I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored," Lisa told Mike one evening as they sat on her balcony overlooking the city. The social media advertisements, the cash-only payments, the vague medical explanations. How did I not see it? Mike had learned a lot about fraud psychology during the investigation. "The FBI agent explained it to me," he said. "These scams work because they target our deepest vulnerabilities and desires. They tell us what we want to hear, and they do it in a way that makes us feel special and chosen. It's not about intelligence. It's about human psychology." 6 months later, Mike and Lisa had settled into an unexpected friendship. The bizarre circumstances that had brought them together had created a bond. Based on mutual support and shared experience, Lisa had received counseling to help process the trauma of being deceived, and she had become an advocate for other fraud victims. She started a support group for people who had been targeted by medical scams, and she worked with law enforcement agencies to help them understand how these sophisticated frauds operated. Mike often helped with the technical aspects, using his programming skills to help investigate suspicious websites and online advertisements. The criminal trial took almost a year, but eventually, Jennifer Walsh and her accomplices were convicted on multiple counts of fraud, practicing medicine without a license, and conspiracy. Lisa testified about her experience, helping to ensure that the perpetrators received significant prison sentences. Standing outside the courthouse after the sentencing, Lisa reflected on how much her life had changed since that strange Tuesday night. "I never thought I'd be grateful for someone breaking into my apartment at 3 in the morning," she told Mike with a smile. Mike laughed. "And I never thought my most exciting adventure would start with debugging code and end with helping solve a federal crime case." They had both learned valuable lessons about trust, deception, and the importance of questioning things that seem too good to be true. But most importantly, they had discovered that sometimes the most meaningful connections in life come from the most unexpected circumstances, and that helping someone in crisis can be one of the most rewarding experiences possible.